Alright, guys. I have got a topic. It's something I'm still kind of working on some ideas with, opinions and things. So I don't know if I'm gonna post it or if I'm even gonna keep it up if I do post it. But I'm too lazy to write it down, so I'm just gonna record. So basically, I talked about, I think, a little bit, on somewhere, on some podcast, I don't know which one, but kind of more about some social topics for 2026. I know I've talked a lot about the internet topics, I've talked a lot about fitness topics, just some other random stuff that I study or have been attempting to study. Based on my fitness related recordings, I would say this is week 21, the night that starts week 21 of the third year of that fitness journey. This is not a fitness episode though. This is currently week 21 of the third year of this whole fitness and health journey. And I'd say since week 15, I have been in some kind of a strange struggle, and I don't fully know how to put a finger on it. There's not like any one thing that I can say that happened, but amongst all of that, I've definitely noticed myself kind of more and more finding a little more comfort in being more isolated with things. Like I've noticed that, week 15, I mean, it's hard for me to really say what days or whatever, but I just know when it was week 15, so if this is starting week 21, it's been like week 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 6 weeks of maybe not the smoothest time frame. Things just, I wouldn't say things felt easiest. Like my energy hasn't felt so easy over like this past 6 weeks. Some days better than others. Not a whole lot of terrible days. It's just, working out has gotten harder. Maybe it's because the heat wave that comes through and stuff. I really can't put a full finger on it, but either way, I know that based on most of the other time during 2026 so far, though it's been the last 6 weeks that I've definitely noticed something is up. And I don't know, so I've been pretty much like not doing a lot of the social stuff that I've mentioned wanting to really participate in or do, with being more sociable community wise, within communities, even if it's just local people that I don't know yet, or not saying that I'm trying to meet every single local person in LA. That would be like impossible, or I don't have the time or money or resources to really do that. But I guess I just mean the people that I've wanted to interact with. I would definitely say I haven't done that a lot. I've definitely been prioritizing a lot of financial stuff, and just, not really trying to spend a lot going out. Like it costs so much to go out, but I don't think that I've learned in my life that that's not the best way to deal with things, is to not go out. I mean, unless the money's just like literally not there, but that's rarely gonna happen. It doesn't take that much to go out, I live within a walkable distance from a lot of places, and have friends that I know could meet to those distances. So it wouldn't be that hard to really just plan with people. It just feels like it's really hard. Like I've noticed, it's not fully related to this topic. So basically, what is the topic? The topic is gonna, about, kind of this kind of social connection, this social life, social changes I've noticed. I'm not necessarily talking about people I know, specific people I know. I'm just talking about the general mood in the city, I guess there's like this new wave of communication style that I don't know if I'm on board with it. And I guess the new communication style is about it's kind of about people being expressive, sharing opinions, sharing ideas that maybe aren't very superficial. There is a lot of depth to them, but also there's a lot of drama. There's a lot of it comes in the form of like political talk. And so I guess, when I was growing up, being raised, in a religious type of community, and I'm not saying all religious communities are this way, but the main social circles I had, I pretty much knew, you can't really be too open with people in those social circles unless you really just want your business like everywhere. It was kind of like, I've talked about it before, very gossipy, very judgmental. Was it everybody? No. Could people keep their mouths shut about stuff? Some people could sometimes. I had a lot of close friends who couldn't, and I had a lot of adults in my life who couldn't. And, I would say it was not the most toxic ever, but it was on a somewhat toxic level, or at least a level that was definitely uncomfortable for me, and that still stands. I still currently kind of have that. I do still currently kind of have this understanding that, not everybody's super safe to really talk to. And I, even now, like those same people, I'm like, even though I've openly communicated with a lot of people from that time period, it is something that I just don't really appreciate with some people. Not all of them, but some people. Okay, jeez. Okay, so I've kind of noticed this new social, I guess I'm gonna call it something along the lines of like the new social structure, the new social patterns. I don't know if it's only a Western thing, I don't really know, but it seems, at least in the US, potentially Canada. I don't know. I talk to people kind of from a little bit of multiple places in the world, not from like every area, but there's a lot of tension between countries and stuff too. I think, I guess what I would say the difference is, it's not like these problems have never been around. It's not like people are like suddenly more struggling for a word. Like, oh, I think people are aware. I think people have been aware before. If I'm thinking like a decade ago, 2 decades ago, I think people were aware. I guess the first place I ever saw or noticed a lot of the outward expression of kind of intense opinions, the comfort of people just kind of saying what they want to say, openly, comfortably, in mixed company, in like their own kind of more exclusive types of groups, either family groups, households, between like close friends, between maybe like-minded people, so you go to an LGBT group, at the center, that's going to be likely you're going to come across LGBT people and allies. You're usually not going to come across a lot of people who are hanging out there that are like prejudiced. Oftentimes you're not. Same with like church groups, same with Jewish religious groups or Muslim religious groups or whatever religious groups. Like, people hang out in their groups, and then they have the people that they're kind of like connected to in those groups. Like, for example, there's a Muslim group I've studied with, and it's a group of Muslims or people who became Muslim or were Muslim or something along the lines of it. There aren't that many of us who wouldn't say that, that we identify culturally as Muslims or with the culture. I think it was maybe me and this old man. I don't fully remember how everybody else thought or believed. But a lot of them seemed, of course, far more familiar than what I was with a lot of that culture. So groups like that, when you're in those groups, they're doing their own thing. If you're not part of that group, you kind of start to realize how much of an outsider you are. Like, I'm not like blaming them. I'm not being like singling out this specific group. I'm just giving an example of something that I've experienced where it's like I'm completely an outsider. I'm just like the outsider that they're letting me come into these meetings. And I can kind of give some perspectives, but a lot of it's like I don't have a lot of true like depth of background on the culture. Maybe some, and there's some overlap, but I don't call myself Muslim. I don't think I'd want people thinking that I'm Muslim, not for any like negative reason. It's just because I'm not, so so I try to make it clear as well. But I also have a bit of curiosity. Like, I wonder if, they're not really maybe able to fully express themselves when they have people in the groups that aren't Muslims. Like maybe they have some kind of topic that they can relate to where they would want to speak about it. They had an event that I really wanted to attend, but the way the flyer was worded, I was kind of like, this seems like a lunch gathering or some kind of meal gathering where they seem like they want to, you know, have community with, you know, these certain populations of people. Now, the Muslim group didn't really seem to mind, you know, me coming into their studies. But, because I was literally there just to, like, listen, you know, if they really wanted opinions, I would try to give opinions if I had any, but, you know, usually I wasn't really, like, talking to them about anything. I was just listening, hearing what they were saying, not trying to, like, trap them up or anything. I was like, you know, it was the most productive thing I could do some Saturday mornings, and I was enjoying it when I was going more often. But, you know, there were other groups that they had, for example, where it was worded like, say if it was like, just as an example, this isn't even something that existed, but say it was like a Muslim group for Muslim women who are mothers and want to meet up. Now, I could have gone to that group maybe because I'm female, but I'm also not a mother, and I'm not a Muslim. So it's like maybe they want to be like, it was a flyer that was kind of worded like that, like Muslim mothers group or something like that. That wasn't the exact group or the name or anything identifiable. I don't know if that exists. I'm just making it up. It was just kind of like two categories together that I was kind of like, well, I kind of fit the categories a little bit, but I'm like, I'm not really, you know, fully that at all, and I'm not Muslim, so I've kind of hesitated to go to some of those other meetings because I'm like, they don't, like, what am I doing there, you know? Like, maybe they want to talk about topics that they can't talk about with people who aren't in that type of, you know, situation. So kind of more like, well, I'm like, okay, it's one thing to be curious about what religions are talking about, but when it comes to like more specific groups, like, do you really want somebody there who's like not really part of that group and just like showing up all the time just to like hear what Muslim mothers have to say? You know, it's kind of like, to me it felt kind of like, it felt a little like it might be a little intrusive or a little kind of like, you know, maybe I'd have to ask permission if I really wanted to join, because, you know, I don't want to overstep, you know. Or if it's like a Muslim men's group and I'm not a man, and it's like, can I just go because I'm curious to know what they're doing? Like, that kind of thing. It's kind of like, it kind of felt like that. Like, okay, like, I don't fully fit this demographic, and it doesn't seem like it's a group that's open to like everybody trying to study like the other one. Like, this group is specifically for these people to kind of meet. So that's kind of what I mean by like a group where it's like, it's not like, it's very like a very narrow, not narrow-minded, but like a very narrow category group. Like, it's like very specific to who they're trying to target to come into this group to kind of communicate with each other or have some kind of sense of community. So there are groups like that. I think a lot of people who are social have groups where they're like, it's pretty narrowed down to like, when you're hanging out with those groups of people, it's like you really have all this other stuff in common, and you're like, you know, you have stuff in common, and you're I guess I don't know, like you might not really want just anybody joining that group. And then within those groups, people are talking more about their own experiences that might be different than what they talk about with other groups that have more diversity within them, more diverse categories of people within them, versus like a more narrow category of people. But I'm not using the word narrow to say like that they don't think critically, or, I'm not trying to use it as like a judgmental thing. I'm just saying, like, I don't know, maybe that's not the right word, because I don't think the right word is open group and closed group. I don't think that's the right terminology. I don't know how else to describe it, but basically what I've been noticing, and I'm not really hating on it so much. I'm just saying, for me, I'm having a hard time with these kind of, just the open talk of people just so openly being just like interested in debating and talking politics, and I don't know, like, I still am of a generation of people who grew up with kind of the cultural teaching of when you don't know somebody very well, don't talk politics, don't talk religion. I think they say don't talk finances. There was a third one. I think the finances were the third one. But, and there are just some things that I don't really tend to kind of start with when I don't know somebody. I tend to not really ask people too much about their jobs. People are a little, I don't know, I don't really like trying to, like, because I think I do kind of size people up a little bit, somewhat, by their jobs. Not really, but a little bit. Like, sometimes when I'm meeting people, I'm kind of thinking, like, how stable might this person be, and are they going to be kind of like a true burden to me? I do kind of think that way, because I'm a bit of a pushover, and I'm also a bit, friendly and sociable, and it's easy for me to want to get involved in, like, knowing what people are up to, or if they want to talk to me about what they're going through, I don't really mind. But then sometimes when people start wanting to depend on me for a lot of stuff, because now I know what they're going through, and then they're like asking for a lot of favors and things, and sometimes I'm just like, I just don't have the energy. I'm not really in a place to really, like, socialize like that. I'm more like, all right, let's go party, let's go hang out. But I don't really have as large of a capacity as I used to. I don't think I ever had a large capacity. I just think I kind of used to suck it up, but I kind of bitterly sucked it up, in the past, and kind of felt in the past like I was maybe used by certain people, or just kind of like they knew I was a pushover, and it was kind of beneficial to them to just not say anything, even if I was gonna get irritated. Like, people just coming over all the time, and they knew I was tired or didn't want to, like, participate in their stuff, and I was exhausted and probably should have stayed home at some things, some events. If it was like, I don't know, I'm just making this up, but say like quinceañeras or like big events where it's like, okay, maybe I would have rather spent that weekend, just chilling by myself. But then, like, I would opt into a lot of things, voluntarily, to do, like, worship team stuff, and to do, like, Sabbath school, lessons and stuff, Friday night type of guitar playing with the people who were trying to, like, help to lead the music, and just, I was busy a lot. But then there were times where I just didn't have the energy for it, and I just felt like obligated to do it. And then on top of that, I'd have people asking me for favors, and for things where it was like, can you take me here, can you help me with this or that? And it was like, I was definitely spread too thin as well. It wasn't so much like they were using me, but it at those times it kind of really felt like that. And so it is kind of hard for me to want to, like, meet people that kind of maybe have a lot of things where I see they're depending on a lot of people a lot. then I kind of get a little, like, if I don't know them, I kind of get a little bit like, I don't know. Because are they going to start asking me for a bunch of stuff? And, like, my energy these last few years is just not what it used to be. And I just kind of am more likely to just not do things that I don't want to do, without feeling obligated. There are a lot of people whose events and things I've just, like, missed just because I just literally don't have the energy. Sometimes I'm like, I want to hang out with friends, but I don't really want to hang out with, like, other people that I don't know, or I want to hang out with people that I know and maybe would like to get them all together, but I can kind of tell they don't want to do that. And then, sometimes, I like just kind of one-on-one stuff too, but sometimes other people kind of want like a whole group thing. It really just depends, and I don't really, none of that's really a big deal. I think that kind of stuff is like, whatever. If I'm getting out of the house at a certain point, sometimes that's fine, because I definitely need to be getting out more, but, it's just difficult, there's a lot, of, because I'm not talking about a specific person or anything, it's just in the air that there's just a lot of, like, room for tension. There's a lot of room for just, like, people wanting to challenge other people. And I guess where this is coming from, I guess why I started off talking about, the growing up religious part, I guess where I was going with that was that, I never really valued the, like, judgmental side of things, the gossipy side of things. Even if it wasn't about me, it just made me uncomfortable. I was like, I don't really want to be in this group that everybody's just trashing this person, and in a way that's, like, it was just so unnecessary. Like, I would understand if somebody, like, came over and, like, broke out all your windows in your car, or, like, egged your house, or, like, was, like, vandalizing your property, or, like, was really doing some, like, true damaging thing, and then somebody wants to vent about it. I would totally kind of understand that more, but it was almost like there was no room for people to make errors or do anything kind of weird or out of place without somebody having to tell somebody else or a whole group of people about that. Like, people weren't easily able to just, like, have conversations about their lives or about, what's actually going on in their lives. They would just want to talk about other people and gossip about other people, and then it wasn't really a safe enough space oftentimes for people to even really be pretty open about what, if anything, what was going on with them. Like, I remember in a class we had once where the teacher had gone on some retreat. She came back with some thing that I guess the adults had practiced that I think was too mature for us. Things like writing our own eulogies and sharing them with the class. She would put on candles, and she would, I think this happened once, but I don't know, once was enough. Put on a candle in the dark, and put on some, like, soft music. And I remember we were sitting under our desks writing our eulogies. I think people shared them, I don't remember. And then, there was a lot of, like, kind of, like, group or, like, one-on-one exercises with a partner of, like, trying to, like, really get to the depths of, like, maybe things in your life that aren't going well with your parents, or, like, things like that, like, on a deeper level. And it was, like, kind of weird, because, like, I don't think she had the ability to help us with any of it. And then, some people were sharing about it, and of course it was a religious school, so we had multiple opportunities to have these really deep kind of group and worship and vespers and devotional sessions that were really I mean, there was no problem that they were deep like that, but it was like, it didn't really, there was no help for it. Or if something was coming up where people were like in tears or whatever, it was just like, now everybody just knows all their business because they've just vented it all over the place. And then it's like, I think people were fairly respectful about it. I think, I could be wrong, but from what I noticed, I didn't notice people taking that to a place of what people were sharing and taking that and like those types of experiences and really just like gossiping about those. I mean, maybe they did, but I don't ever remember hearing that happen or seeing it. But pretty much any of the other stuff, that wasn't like that level of depth, people would just kind of like just be ripping other people, usually not to their face. Sometimes it was. So I think with the religious stuff, that was kind of the main thing about it, that I was like, I'd like to branch out socially from this. It wasn't necessarily that I didn't want to study the stuff. It wasn't necessarily that I didn't like those people. I was just like, I would like to know other people, maybe in addition to these types of people, and know people who are kind of more trustworthy. So I know when I was like in grad school and even in early college before that, I started meeting more people that weren't religious people. And I started to realize that like, the way I was just kind of like sarcastic and kind of like, just like, I would just like say things just because, in the religious environment I grew up in, it was fine to just like say stuff and nobody would call you on it. You could say prejudice stuff, you could say all kinds of like weird things, and nobody would really be like, you're not supposed to say that. People would just almost like want to chime in on it or something. Like it was like more socially acceptable to just have bad behavior, like socially. Like just because there were so many rules, people just wanted to break the rules. And like, and the age range too, like when you're like around your teens and 20s, you're not maybe trying to like follow every single thing that's a rule all the time. Not everybody's like that, but there really was just a lot of, I mean, it was a different time, different decades, of time, but the reason why I was mentioning all that, and I know I mentioned it a lot, but the reason why I was mentioning all that was mainly because, when I left that environment, I did notice, I was like, a lot of things I was taught about people that weren't religious, I kind of found socially the environments being a lot calmer. People were a lot more respectful of other people's differences. People weren't like trying to shove things down each other's throats too much. And I kind of definitely learned a lot, from people who weren't religious. And there was a lot that I liked about hanging out with them, that I was like, whoa, this is actually really cool. That you can actually like talk to these people in your class and they're not gonna like blab all your business to everybody. Or you could, like it was like the social rules were almost stricter outside of the church. There was like an unspoken kind of like, you don't really mess with other people. Not really. I don't know, because there were people who would still take things too far in any setting. And I'm not saying all the church people were like that either. I would say maybe it was even on both ends, but maybe the people I met outside of the church, not all of them. I think some of the first people I started hanging out with were really not nice people. In high school, they were just not nice. I hung out with them for a while, but there were a lot of people I met in high school that were just not okay. But it's like, it's high school too, so it's kind of like whatever. And I mean, it wasn't everybody, but I'm just saying the specific people I met. There were some specific people those were probably the first people that were new to my life, that I was like, oh, these people are just like those other people in a way, but just like a little bit less, I don't know, they just weren't that nice. I don't know their names, I don't know where they're at, I couldn't even pick them out in a group, I couldn't tell you anything. I know what they looked like then, I don't know anything about them now. Don't even remember their names at all, really. One of them tried to steal my stuff. It was just like, what is going on here? Like, I never really encountered stuff necessarily like that. But, we came into a friendship, and then I kind of realized, I was like, I don't think I want to hang out with these people. And I still had my other friends, so I was kind of not that, interested in that. But I remember trying to find, like, church groups in high school. But I was like, these aren't the same types of people either. And it was kind of like it was a weird culture shock for quite a few years, I would say. High school, junior, senior year, and then probably going into college maybe after that first year, because one of my close friends was with me that first year, I think, or part of that first year. So we met people kind of together. Then he had to move to a religious school once it started. So it must have been like a month or two. And then he had to move to a religious school. And then I moved. Well, I stayed there. So I kind of kept some of the friends that we'd made in common. Kind of met some people along the way. Kind of started intermingling some of the people I met at the college. There were a lot of religious people, but a variety. So it was like Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, like all of us were kind of just hanging out all the time. Some people weren't religious at all, but we would just hang out because of like the clubs we were in and stuff. And then we'd hang out on the weekends and do other stuff. So we kind of had like kind of professional type of school stuff in common. And then we had like just like social people in common. And I think those were some of the people that I met that I was like, okay, like overall all these people kind of like try to like be nice, and like I kind of saw that like there was like a lot of effort put in. And then from that point, there was a lot of effort put in with a lot of the other people that I met from early college days and on. And maybe it was a maturity thing, maybe it wasn't, I don't really know. Because I was still going to church a lot, like up until probably about my first year of grad school. And, so I don't really know. No, it wasn't my first year. It was like my third year of grad school, I think. No, my first year that I moved to San Diego. So after my first year, I'd moved to San Diego. By the second year, that's kind of when I stopped driving up for church almost every weekend and stuff. Probably like my second year being in San Diego. So I would go and do my own thing, and I started gravitating more towards those people because I was like, it was kind of calmer, there wasn't that kind of like stress of like having to kind of pretend and like not be able to like talk about anything real, but there was still that kind of like, people didn't really debate about religion. You didn't really talk about it, even though there were all these diverse groups of people. We kind of just knew it's like, okay, these girls, when they hang out with us, they can't ride in the cars with the guys, or like these guys gotta go pray sometimes, and these guys don't eat at these kind of restaurants or eat meat, and these people don't do this on those days. But people just did their own thing. Nobody really was like debating it or anything. And then I guess well, I guess before that, though, the first time I had seen a lot of conflict was probably near September 11th and near the Twin Towers getting bombed and all the other kind of crashes and plane hijackings that happened during that time frame. It was like in a day, or was it like a 1 or 2 day span? I don't even remember. But that was my senior year of high school. That's how my senior year of high school started. So I remember that. And then I remember when the war started. But I remember there being a lot of tension around then. But I don't really remember there being a whole lot of tension just like there is now. Between like maybe September 11th time frame, that was a lengthy time frame. It was like years. It spanned like years. So that time frame all the way up to like the pandemic. I kind of noticed more division and stuff during the pandemic as well, but all in between that, and that's why I'm like, I don't know if I'm oblivious, because I was so busy in school. My whole life was like school, and my friends connected with school, and church, my friends connected with church, and grad school, my friends connected with grad school. The professors I was like around, and just professional related stuff. Like I was not dialed into like what was going on in world events at all. Other than when my friends were joining the military, that's kind of the only thing that I kind of noticed. I was like, oh, I got a lot of friends going to like Afghanistan and Iraq and stuff. Like that was something that I kind of noticed that wasn't happening before. So a lot of the talk about military and stuff, there was a lot of talk about military and kind of like some of the war related things. But I would say about, those were the major time frames where I noticed it, like near September 11th, during COVID, and then I think since COVID it's just kind of continued. People have just seemed to have gotten just very comfortable talking about political topics. Not just political topics, but I mean political topics kind of govern what is allowed in society and everything, how people are allowed to access information that seem to be as more socially acceptable in some groups versus in other groups, or ideas or things that people support being more acceptable in some groups versus other groups. And there's a lot of taboo topics, and I guess one thing that I'm not fully vibing with is just kind of like the comfort with it. Because I guess when I started meeting more people in the field of psych, when I was in, like grad school in San Diego. Well, before that too. Grad school in LA too, but it was a little different because in LA I was doing more research, and then in San Diego it was more clinical stuff. So the classes were kind of different, but there was still that kind of like your lab and then the similar kind of labs, and you kind of had these like really close relationships with certain other students. Like there would be like small groups of hubs of little student groups where it's like these people hang out with each other, those people hang out with each other, and you'd be pretty close, because you spend so much dang time together in a difficult environment. And then you did have kind of that understanding of like, okay, we have these things in common and we can talk about certain stuff and share about certain stuff, and like, but if we're like bashing this professor, we're not going to go outside of these walls and go talk about this with other people, or it stays between us. Like there was a lot of that. So it's like you kind of knew that certain people hung out with certain people, and then it was like you didn't really fully know who was like gonna be close, who was close, who wasn't gonna be close. It was really kind of hard to know. So, yeah, like, because it wasn't like, I don't know, like, that side, the research side was a little different. I think the clinical side there was a lot more, like, confidentiality practices even within class, I'd say. Because we did have, I don't remember what my classes were. I think there was one class called, like, interpersonal therapy or something like that. It was, like, psychodynamic. And you kind of go through the book and read I think it was like almost like a script, like client and therapist scripts, and you kind of go through the lesson, and like one person would read the therapist, the other person would read the client, and then you kind of maybe pick a topic that was like within something you didn't really mind sharing, but something that had some depth to it. And then somebody would, pretend to be the therapist on that topic. And then you kind of switch roles and you'd maybe critique each other. And then you would maybe tell the class. You would tell the class about it. You would say to the class, okay, here's the topic. We did the script, we did the groups, we switched the roles, and I think the professor would come around to like each group, or we would come back as a whole group, and then kind of like each group could go around. If people wanted to like talk about their experience with it, they could, but within those groups it kind of stayed within the class, and then things stayed kind of within the individual teams. But like you weren't with the same people paired up every time, I don't think, or maybe you were. I really don't remember. I there's so much I don't remember. I've like wiped it from my memory. But we'd have classes like that where there was a lot of sharing, I could say that much. More sharing than any other classes before that part of my psychology career passed. But I didn't mind it, but it was kind of awkward. And then you had, with your practicum, you'd have a supervisor, a clinical supervisor. So that person, they were like a cross between your manager, your boss, and a therapist, or just someone who like facilitated the other, practicing students. And so, or interns, or whatever they're called now, I don't even know. But basically, we were called practicum students. I don't know what, I think the names changed after I was there. But I think they were called clinical interns at one point, but we were called practicum students. So basically the practicum students, it would basically be like you have 20 hours or 28 hours a week or something, or 24 hours a week for like 8 weeks or 10 weeks out of the year or something, and you'd have to like do these unpaid practicums or internships where you basically worked for a company for free, and you assess clients, and you take on individual clients, and you take on a therapy group. And so you're basically doing the work, but you were shadowing other staff, and then you'd lead groups. Eventually you get to the point where you could lead the individual sessions or the groups by yourself. And then not only would you do that, you would meet with your individual, you'd meet with the supervisor, the clinical supervisor individually. It wasn't necessarily called a therapy session, but it was very similar to a therapy session. And you'd basically meet that clinical supervisor at your practicum, and they would you would kind of talk to them about any individual clients that you have, things that are either hard for you emotionally to deal with, or hard for you just the dynamics, or hard for you just like you don't even know what to say, or how to like end on time, or how to start on time, or anything that was coming up that was like a problem. There were some sessions we had to record them, and then we listened back to it with the supervisor individually or even in a group, and then there would be some critiquing. They would go through your assessments and correct your writing and look at your notes, and it was every single aspect of what you did. You're being critiqued on it, either individually, or you would meet as a group with the staff, with other practicum students, and with some of the there were certain groups that needed supervision. Basically, if you weren't licensed, you had to be working under supervision. So if you weren't a licensed therapist yet, even if you were working at the site, or if you were a student because you weren't licensed as a student either, you'd have to meet individually with the supervisor, I think once a week, and then with what's called group supervision, where all the people who needed that supervision would meet once a week. And it would almost be like a group therapy session, but it wasn't really therapy. It was more like learning, teaching, critiquing, running ideas by each other, trying to like problem solve and like treatment plan, and like kind of fine tune a lot of the stuff. And you could kind of chime in for other people, and you kind of go around and like chime in for other people when they kind of said that they were like, hey, I'm struggling with this client and I don't really know how to deal with this symptom of their diagnosis, or I'm noticing this kind of cycle with them, or I'm noticing that, or whatever. And it was basically stuff that you didn't really know what to do with, or you needed more advice. And the supervisor would chime in, and then other people would chime in too. It was very organized though. You kind of go around in a circle. And there were other topics that were more like I remember one specific topic I can speak to where, I was in a group with not mostly Latinos, but some Latinos, I think some other Middle Eastern people, white people. I think I was the only black person, and I was a practicum student, and it was, group supervision, and we got on the topic somehow of talking about race and like color and shades of color. And I remember some of the Latinos saying something along the lines of sharing about how in their culture, at least these specific people were saying that when you're darker skinned, or you're not expected to be darker skinned, or like people who are darker skinned are maybe like looked at a little less favorably than the lighter skinned people, or like they've had family comment to them saying things like, oh, you're getting so dark, or wear a hat, or wear sunscreen, don't go out in the sun too long, you're gonna get dark. Like it was like a bad thing to be dark. And I guess I was probably scowling, I don't really know, because I think the supervisor called me out and was like, why aren't you saying anything, like why you look kind of mad. And then they kind of asked me to like share about it, and I didn't really share exactly what I was thinking. I kind of shared some kind of vague topic. I remember what I said, but I'm not going to repeat it. But I mean, it wasn't rude, but I just kind of said something that I was thinking, but not a deeper topic of what I was saying, because I was kind of offended by where these people were going with this conversation. I mean, being a black person, it's kind of like hard to sit in a room when you're the only one and everybody's talking about how unfavorably their culture looks at people who are dark, even if it wasn't them specifically saying that themselves. I'm not saying that they believe that, but it was like, it's not like easy to like sit and just listen to that. And I was like, well, I don't want to say anything, and this group full of people that aren't even the same race as me. Like, how are they even gonna understand what I'm saying? You know? So I didn't really feel comfortable saying what I actually thought, so I didn't. But I said something. But I wasn't really too forthcoming with what I was saying. I said something enough to participate, but not enough to really be like, this is actually my opinion on this topic. So I don't think, I mean, I didn't really like the supervision process necessarily, or even those like interpersonal therapy type of therapy client role play classes. We had a lot of those kind of role play type of classes, or classes where you were doing a lot of like, there's a lot of sharing going on, and like writing about reflections and sharing your reflections with the instructor, and like it was very involved. You know, and like I didn't hate it, but it was like, if you don't like the supervisor, or if the supervisor doesn't really seem like they like you, like I'm kind of more a sensitive person, so I like, it takes me longer than just like, oh, if I'm just your student, I'm just gonna warm up to you and just start telling you things. Like, I'm not like that. It usually takes me a couple years to probably get comfortable with somebody and be able to kind of like figure out for myself how to deal with when someone else reacts in a way that I don't want them to, when I know they're not intentionally being hurtful, but it is hurtful to me, and I just know it's just me at a certain point. I'm like, this is just me, it's not really them, and it takes me a while to kind of learn how to like deal with those types of situations. So I don't tend to go into like easy sharing situations with people who I'm like, not everybody I'm gonna just warm up to. And I've had certain supervisors or professors or just certain people that were in leadership roles in my life that just weren't good people, I don't think. Or if they were, you know, it was really hard for me to see it because they weren't treating me very nicely on a regular basis. Like, it would go on to a point where I was just like counting down the weeks till I just never had to see them again. But it was like, it was always in a position where it's like, well, I can't quit, because if I quit, I'm the one who's losing. If I speak up, I'm the one who's not gonna pass this class, or I'm the one who's gonna get reprimanded. Like, they were protected by their roles or by their degrees or whatever kind of like status they had. They were kind of protected by that. And you know, I've come across some mildly to extremely abusive types of people, a few, not like way too many, but a few, even in professional settings, where it's kind of like, I think they know though, because it's like, they know they can treat you like that, but then at a certain point it's like, you know, they stop doing it. It's almost like the abusive parent who stops being abusive to their kid once their kid's like 18 and an adult and big and strong, and it's like, oh, suddenly they don't want to like be hitting them anymore, something like that. I'm not saying that they were hitting me, but I'm just saying like that it's kind of like, if you're not really academically on their level or like degree wise on their level, you're still under them in a way where they can just treat you however they want. And I'm not saying it was everybody, it was a few people, but I think every field has these types, and it's unfortunate, but knowing what I know now, I wouldn't change that experience, but it did some damage for sure. But I definitely learned a lot from having to deal with it. But yeah, I'm not saying it was like pleasant at all. But yeah, those were the experiences I think I'd had where when those instructors were good, I had so many good supervisors. I had so many good professors and supervisors, like so many of them. and bosses and managers and stuff, leads. I had so many good ones. They were so good, you know. They were very helpful, and you know, you could kind of like, they would really help you out with a lot of stuff, like even like with coping with certain things. Like they were really helpful, very very helpful. But there were like the select few that were not helpful at all. They were more damaging than helpful, but mostly people were helpful, and I'm glad at least that I had mostly good experiences. But I kind of did value it though when it was a good experience. I was like, well, this is worth, you know, kind of putting yourself on the line a little bit sometimes. It was kind of worth it because it made you better at what you did. It kind of brought like new levels of insight to things for sure. So I definitely liked that. But then when I kind of fast forward to like the current day, I do like that people are sharing what they think and sharing their opinions. But this is a kind of way of sharing that I don't really know where I stand in it. You know, I mean, I know what I believe for the most part. I know where I stand about certain things. I don't really know how much I really want to share it with people. And especially if I am sharing it with people, I only really want to share it with specific close people. I don't want to share that kind of information with people who I don't know. And oftentimes, you know, I felt, and it might just be me, because I don't think people are intentionally trying to do this. And it's not a lot of people. And I'm not talking about any specific person. I'm just saying, if I'm tallying up the things that have been bugging me lately with the social newness that's going on, it's just kind of like, it feels preachy in a way sometimes. The way people, I don't like the preachiness of how it feels, where it's like people are kind of like telling other people how to be. I don't like when people do it to me, and I don't like it when I don't know somebody very well. I don't like that at all. When it's like, I don't really know you that well, we don't really know each other, and early on we're kind of talking about topics that are like, in previous times you would have waited like quite a few months to be trying to like bring up these topics, but nowadays this new social thing that's going on is like, people meet and they are talking about things that are pretty in depth, and I'm very hesitant. I'm like, you know, I don't really want to share my in-depth ideas about this topic. And it's so many topics. It's like, people are so informed about so many things that I have completely checked out from being informed about. Or if I am informing myself about it, I take so long to inform myself. I'll give you an example. Because I was recently studying a lot of tech stuff. Windows, you know, Microsoft, you know, owned by Microsoft, is pretty widespread. I mean, there aren't that many jobs where you're never gonna use Windows software. You're never gonna touch Microsoft Teams. You're never gonna use Outlook. You're never gonna get provided with a, you know, probably a Lenovo ThinkBook, you know, laptop for your company, from the company, and like a cell phone. There's probably gonna be an iPhone, maybe an Android, but usually an iPhone. I've had that situation so many times. All my work phones have been iPhones. All my work laptops have been Lenovo ThinkBooks. I think they're all Lenovo ThinkBooks. And even the ones that we would borrow at work to do overtime to take them home were Lenovo ThinkBooks. So I think there was maybe one or two that were not Lenovo ThinkBooks. There were other brands, but I think overall they were Lenovo ThinkBooks. And then at the work sites, a lot of times there were Dell laptops. So we'd have a lot of time doing that. We'd have a lot of Microsoft related products. I think that's still a thing. But, some people are mad at Bill Gates. Some people are mad at Elon Musk. Everybody's running around with Teslas, but at least in LA they are. But, I know a lot of people who are so pissed off about Tesla. And I'm not going to go into any of the details. I'm just going to use these companies as an example. So say, for example, if I don't like Elon Musk and I don't like Bill Gates anymore, like say I've decided through my research, and this is not a fact, I am not saying this, I am just saying, say if I came to that conclusion, for example, say if that was the conclusion I came to, and I don't like Bill Gates anymore, I don't like Elon Musk anymore, but I order an Uber to drive me across town, and the Uber is a Tesla. Do I cancel that Uber ride and take the $5 hit or whatever because I don't like Elon Musk? Am I really going to take that strong of a stand, or am I just going to not buy a Tesla? Or if other people I know are looking for new cars, am I just going to tell them don't buy a Tesla even though I have a car that's not a Tesla? I don't have a Tesla, but because I don't like Elon Musk, I'm going to warn everybody about Teslas. Don't buy a Tesla. We all know it's connected with Elon Musk. I don't like him. Don't buy a Tesla. Right? I mean, this is what I'm talking. This kind of thing is what I'm talking about that bothers me. Or Microsoft. I don't like Bill Gates. Am I going to turn down a job because they use Microsoft Teams? Am I going to request that I can't use Teams? Am I going to tell them I don't use Windows anymore? Sorry, I can't log into my Outlook email because I'm against it, I'm not using these products anymore. I'm not saying people should or shouldn't use them. I'm not saying people shouldn't buy Teslas. I'm not saying people shouldn't use computers or whatever, but it's like, I guess what gets to me, one thing that gets to me are people telling other people what to do, but they're probably doing it too. I haven't really heard anybody go the Microsoft route or the Windows route. That's kind of something that I'm curious about. I really don't want to get into it with people, but it is a topic I'm a little curious about. Like, what do people really feel about using those products if they don't like Bill Gates? What do they feel about that? And where do people draw the line? Or do people just want to tell other people what to do? But there's a lot of that. And I don't know where it's coming from. Maybe I'm just sensitive to it. I don't know what's going on. But it really makes me not want to socialize with people. I'm not even talking about specific people I know. I'm just saying it really makes it hard to meet people when you meet people and the first conversations you have are like people judging you based on what you've bought or what you've used because they don't like it. They don't agree with it for some political reason. Therefore, they're judging you because you're using it and you don't even know me. It's like, you don't know me. We don't know each other. I don't know you. I haven't maybe developed that judgment yet for people because I'm not connected enough. I'm trying not to get connected enough with hating everything to a point that when I see other people using it, that I feel that I need to call them out on it for supporting it. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't feel good about that. Because the way I see it, in all honesty, the way I see it at the moment is everybody picks and chooses, right? Unless we're living in the middle of a forest or in the middle of the jungle somewhere where we're building our own tools and we're not really connected with any major corporately greedy company. We're not driving cars because of where the oil comes from. We're not using certain major technological brands equipment at all. Not using their apps. We're not participating in certain types of things on our weekends because of corporate greed. We're not eating certain brands of food because of how the animals are treated and how the conditions are, and what it does to the environment. And we're not doing anything. Like, at a certain point, it's like I'm kind of just like, okay, people can tell me not to do certain things, but all of us are doing some of them. And I'm not saying that's an excuse. I'm not saying it's good to just like be like, well, I'm still going to do these other 5 things, but these other 10 things, I'm going to hound everybody else about them. But I guess it's the judgment I don't like about it. I think everyone's kind of on their own timeline about what they want to do or how they want to change, if they do want to change. I remember having a quite brief conversation with multiple friends. I brought this up with multiple friends. I'll just say my side of it because I don't really think there's anything that I shouldn't be sharing about it. But sometimes I do reselling online, and I've dabbled somewhat in buying products out of China and reselling them. Sometimes it goes okay. There's also often a lot of red tape that just comes up out of nowhere, but I've learned a lot of lessons from it. But then there's a part of me that's like, I need to vet these companies. There was a part of me that initially wanted to like brand a product and get it manufactured and branded and start like talking to factories in China and like connecting with them. And I was like, my head started just like spinning, and I was just like, I'm gonna have to make sure that the workers are okay. I was like, that would be on me. Like, I don't think I could have a company where I knew that it was like mothers being exploited, living in dorms, getting paid like a penny a year or whatever. I don't know, I'm exaggerating, but it's like people getting treated badly, living in poor conditions, being exploited so I could sell this computer mouse or whatever the heck, thing that they're making for like, and getting no profit, and I'm over here paying my bills with it, and they're over there like suffering away from their children just because they need some kind of work. It's like, yeah, you're providing work, but you're not like contributing to them having a better life. Maybe it's a better life if they're making some money versus no money, but it's like, I don't know, I have standards for how I feel like people should be treated in the workplace. I do. Like, I would not, and just the fact that I know that would be a part of it, I'm like, well, I would want to pop into China and pop into my factory and like, not spy on them, but just like pop in and be like unannounced. Like, make sure that, nobody's like doing any damage there. Make sure nothing shady's going on. Even the products, I'd want them to be made out of quality materials that weren't damaging the people's health. I wouldn't want the plastics to be non, like, I don't know. It's just such a topic to just go down that route and try to talk about that. So I know if I were creating some kind of company that was a brand that had some kind of product that they were selling and somebody's manufacturing it and there's a factory involved or people creating something, I would want that to be quality all around. I would value that. Would I let things slide? I don't know. I've never done it before. I would hope that I wouldn't just turn a blind eye to things just because I'm making money out of it. I would hope I would not be that person. But do I buy products where I turn a blind eye to how the people are treated? Yes. Do I refuse to look into certain products that I buy because I'm kind of like, I heard that they're maybe a little bit bad. I don't really want to look into this too much, I'm still going to buy the Nautica and the Nike or I don't really care, but about brands like that specifically, but I can't tell you that I'm never going to buy something that was made in a sweatshop. That's not true. There are brands that I already know, like the ones I just mentioned, that they have some kind of issues behind them. And I even maybe don't know all the full issues, but it wouldn't be that hard to look them up. And it wouldn't be hard to just make that decision. But it's well, how far into those decisions do we go? I think that's a personal decision. I think that it's a personal decision. If I decide what I want to buy, do I think it's against my own values to buy things that are made in a way that are exploiting people? I do think it's against my values. I do not value that. I do not agree with it. Do I put dollars into it and support it? I'm sure I do. There are companies that I don't look at because I kind of don't want to know. But there's a lot of that going on, and I'm not saying that it's good to make excuses for it. I'm just saying, where does the line get drawn? I think, and I'm not saying just because everybody chooses probably at least something that they're participating in purchasing that's exploiting somebody out there. I'm not saying that just because everybody's doing it with at least one company that it's okay to do it at all. I'm not saying that it's okay. I don't think it's okay. But I also don't think it's okay to bash people or to make people feel bad or to go on an ego trip about it or to kind of try to be judgmental about other people's decisions just because, especially when it's more so a popular topic. Sometimes I've noticed people are kind of jumping into the popular topic, and I can tell what's popular because I'm when I'm socializing with people, everybody's talking to me about it. I kind of notice these waves of conversations and topics that people kind of go through. And I'm not trying to be a jerk about it, but it's hard for me. I'm having a hard time with it. I'm not saying that I'm having a hard time with people calling me on things, but in a way I'm well, if you don't know me, don't call me on something that you don't really know. I don't live in the jungle with a machete that I built myself and I'm hacking down trees and building fires and building my own clothes out of straw, and I have a hut that I built over somewhere and I'm hunting for boar meat and eating sago grubs out of trees and tree bark and creating some kind of I don't know. I live in Los Angeles. What would it take for someone living in LA to not purchase anything that had some level of exploitation and corporate greed behind it? What could I not? I couldn't talk on an iPhone. I couldn't probably use Spotify to post. I can't there's probably, I don't know, certain guitars I play and stuff, certain instruments I use, certain software I use, certain devices I use, whether it's for work or for home or just personal use or just certain, events that I pay for. What's up with the World Cup? What's up with the Olympics? I don't have World Cup tickets, but I have tickets to a couple of the Olympics events. Am I going to be part of that reselling market? Probably. Is it going to be maybe not so easy of a... I don't know. It's kind of like, yeah, you're driving up prices for something that you got dirt cheap just because you got in early, and then you can charge, however much you want to charge for something, but it's like, well, if they buy it, what's the harm in that? If you're not, but it's like, I don't know. I guess I'm struggling with where do people draw the line in, in the judging versus their own choices. It's very hard for me to want to listen to people kind of sharing what they think myself or other people should not do when everybody is so connected to all this stuff. Maybe this is going to be the beginning of a lot of companies having to become accountable, and one by one they're going to kind of start feeling the pain of it and changing their ways. If nobody does anything, it's going to continue going in a direction where there's going to be all that exploitation. If it becomes a common practice where people are, I think it would have to be small steps, groups of people, just small groups of people turning bigger and bigger and making more and more decisions to where there's more people making those decisions to where it is impactful. I've seen a little bit about it with snowboarding, because I love snowboarding, even though I haven't been able to go in a very long time. But it's kind of ridiculous at this point. I'm literally starting to save to go. So there's this thing with snowboarding. I don't really know exactly how to explain it, but basically it used to be cheap when I was younger, and everything's gone up since then. But there have been some major companies that have bought out a lot of resorts. I don't know if it's only nationwide or international, but I know at least in the US, there are, I guess, multiple topics connected to this. So there's like these passes that cost maybe a couple $1,000s where you can use them kind of like almost whenever you want to. There's like different tiers of them. It's like a season pass, but it's more like a season pass for multiple types of resorts. So if you travel around and you're going to go up a lot, this pass is actually a better deal to have, because you're going to be able to get up to the mountains often. So you can get this pass. And there's like the Icon Pass, the Epic Pass. These are examples of these like passes that you can get that cost more than a season pass, but technically if you go a lot, it's a better deal. And there's a season pass that's also better than buying a one-off ticket unless you're gonna go just once. But the tickets have become like over $120 for a day pass. That's not including the parking that's usually $20 plus, maybe $30 for the day. And then the gas, at the moment, gas is like about $6.50 or so a gallon out here. And then, I don't know what it's going to be by the new season. I guess the new season's November. But there's those passes. There's let's see. Yeah, basically these resorts are experiencing a lot of issues with these buyouts, with the price hikes, with I don't know. There's like a bunch of problems to a point where I can't really explain it all. Like this would have to be a whole episode about that, and I don't want to change it into a whole episode about just that. But I mean, I'm already like almost 90 minutes in, but I would say that I guess the sites where they saw the workers going on strike, and it wasn't the whole season striking, it was a short period of time, they were able to have enough leverage, and I think this was recent, they were able to have enough leverage to kind of get some of what they wanted. Not all of it, but there was some kind of bargaining that happened between the workers at these resorts and the people who were in charge in management or corporate to some extent. I don't really know who exactly the sit downs were with and like the exact details of how it came out to be, but I am aware that it did work. And so I do think a lot of people making these changes is going to shift a lot of how some of the things are going in the world with some of these corporations. I don't know what that does to the economy. I don't really know how that plays a role, because I think our economy is very much backed by a lot of things that, a lot of the people that some may not be supporting definitely have a lot of holding in the stock market that definitely affects the economy, and they probably have a lot of say in government and a lot of say in policies. I see it with the tech stuff because it's like, ever since, I guess there were like a lot of these major social media companies that went on trial. I don't know if you call it a trial, but I guess it was a trial. I don't really know the terminology, but they went on trial, and there were a lot of topics that they discussed where they were like, you guys have to change this. And I think it was coming from the government on some level, where they were like, you guys are taking this too far, it needs to be changed. And some of the companies were like, yes, we'll change it, and then others were kind of trying to double down and like make excuses, or say that they had changed things when they hadn't, and they were kind of coached, I guess, how to lie about it to try to get away with things. And I don't know, this is like a whole other topic when it comes to all the technological stuff I found out just from like being around it so often lately. I'm like, ooh, there's a lot of stuff that I do not like. It's very creepy and weird. I can't go into all of it right here at all, but yeah, it's just, I'm not saying that I think necessarily that people shouldn't talk about their beliefs and their opinions. Maybe how they talk about it is a conversation that might need to be had, because not everybody relates to hearing certain information the same way. I know myself, I like to have deep conversations about stuff, but I don't really like to argue. I wouldn't say, if I'm going to argue with somebody, we're going to be dang close. And if I'm going to actually like want to have a debate with you and go back and forth, that means that I don't feel like at the end of this we're gonna be having hurt feelings and not wanting to talk anymore. Like I only share those types of interactions with people that I'm like, we gotta be solid, you know. I don't really make a practice of wanting to, I'm not saying I don't do it, but I don't make a practice of actually wanting to schedule time to have these kinds of conversations with people, unless I know that we're solid. If we're not solid, I don't really want to do it. So you know, I guess my method has been just try not to talk to anybody about any of it. I mean, I'll talk on here when I have something to say, and I, like, this is about as detailed as I get. I keep it pretty vague, for the most part. I think I'm kind of vague. Sometimes I record things and I'm like, I don't think I should have recorded or posted that, so I'll take it down. I've been doing that more often. I've got a lot of episodes lately that I don't know. I think I've got a lot of fitness episodes that I might not post on the podcast. I don't know if I want to do that. I might want to talk more about these types of topics, not about Elon Musk or whatever. I don't really want to talk about these people or their corporations and all this. I don't really want to talk about, you know, the madness behind the scenes. Like, I don't really want to talk about all that, you know, because I don't want to study it the way that I would need to study it to be comfortable actually talking about it. When I talk about things, it's because I've been studying them, or it's something that I'm starting to study and I want to talk about it from a point of view of what I've been studying and what I've learned about. I don't really want to talk about it in a way that's like sharing my political opinions or my views on things. I mean, people who tune into the more like religious, spiritual types of topics, those types of podcast posts, they probably, I mean, I talk about my background. I talk a bit about things that I like to study, things that I like to like learn, what I'm currently learning. I don't really have like a deep learning schedule right now. I actually miss it, but I've been studying so much other work-related stuff. I just don't have the time lately to be like studying all this esoteric stuff. I mean, I should make the time because I actually really like it, and I feel like, you know, something's like lacking in my life when I'm like not learning on those types of levels. Like, I like that type of stuff. I'm not saying I really like to pick just one group. Like, as we all know, I like to just float around in whatever feels like whatever I feel like diving into, I want to dive into that. I kind of lean into kind of like what feels at the time kind of like relevant to what my mind wants to think about. But yeah, a lot of these things going on, and I'm not even talking about like if it's opinions that I'm like for or against, like all of them. I don't want to talk about any of it. In a way, because I'm not informed in a way. I'm very like into research. I'm very into lit reviews. To me, if I want to talk about something, you know, I'm really want to look at the side that I believe and the opposing side, and some kind of alternative stuff and some stuff in between. I'm gonna want to get a good understanding of all the angles. But right now, there were like so many topics that I'm like, there aren't that many topics that I really want to dive into. I mean, I've dove into some topics that are just exhausting, and that's probably why I haven't had a lot of energy for the past few weeks. I've just been exhausting myself with drama, and you know, I've been, you know, mostly studying topics, gathering data on maybe the job application systems, ATS tracking, how many job applications are people getting, comments from recruiters, and kind of this, back and forth about Gen Z and all this, millennials or whatever. At first they were picking on millennials, now they're picking on Gen Z. Like, I remember when there were all these Dave Ramsey episodes about millennials. When I started getting more interested in finance content during the pandemic, there were a whole lot of videos about millennials, and even, I guess, before that, people were often talking about millennials. And now the conversation is like Gen Z, and I'm regurgitating that. Like, somebody else brought it up, and I'm like, yeah, that's true. People were just venting about millennials not that long ago. I remember all that, and now they're venting about Gen Z. Soon it's gonna be Alpha. I don't really know, but yeah, I'm trying to figure out, because I do like things to go in a direction where it's like more humanitarian, less exploitative. I like the idea of that. I think it is possible to get that way worldwide. I mean, there's so many systems breaking down in so many places. Something's gonna have to give. I don't know what it's gonna look like, but it's already not looking good. And it seems to be getting worse, but I can't tell if it's really getting worse or if just people are talking about it so much more often now now that it's completely at the forefront that it's worse. Like, the forefront of a lot of conversations is something political. I try and think of the days when I don't hear anything political at all from anybody at all. I don't know the last time I've gone through a day where I heard nothing from anybody that was, like, even if it was like something in the past. Like, for example, I can't think of any. Yeah, it kind of came up slightly today too. Like, it's just in the air. Like, that's just how it is now. This is like the new way, the new method of socializing is to be, very open about opinions. And I guess I've liked the level of openness a lot of times where I saw it, in college, and, with certain groups of people, like the kind of social setting that it was comfortable like that, or even in grad school, or in clinical programs, or even working. Like, once I started actually working after practicum and having all these coworkers, and we'd go hang out and do stuff together, and we could actually really talk about stuff, where I was like, I trust these people. I don't think they're gonna be like telling everybody about what we talked about. Like, every so often, somebody says something out of place, or like makes mention of something. I think just naturally that's how it goes. Like, some people aren't that buttoned up about certain things, but overall I would say I've developed, and gladly so, I've developed a lot of relationships that, like, if I look at how things were when I was younger and then how they are now, I definitely know a lot of people now where it's like, it's a whole lot easier to kind of just like know who's trustworthy. If there's certain stuff, it's like easy to be like, okay, don't tell it to them, but like, these other people are gonna be cool. And it's not really like that people always have to agree with me. That's not what I mean. I'm just talking about, like, say if you do something and I'll give an example. Say if you get like a DUI. I'm glad I don't have one, but say if you get a DUI, who would you tell or who wouldn't you tell, right? That kind of thing. It's like certain people you probably wouldn't want to know that, you wouldn't want them knowing that about you, and other people you'd be like, I did this thing, and I got a DUI, and this sucks, and you trust that at least they'd kind of be understanding about it and not too harsh or critical, or even if they were, at least they keep it to themselves maybe, or just between the two of you, or whoever you're talking to it with, but not necessarily telling every single person, at all. Like, I think using that as an example, a lot of us could kind of be like, oh yeah, maybe I'd tell no one. Maybe there's no one in my life like that, or maybe there's these people or those people, and then there's not those people, not those other people over there either. A lot of times we have those kind of topics, and I'm glad that I do know trustworthy people, whereas maybe growing up I don't think I really felt like I totally did. Like, I have felt out the ones who I know now are, but back then maybe it wasn't that way. And it could be a maturity thing too, like, because I was quite a bit younger, and high schoolers maybe aren't the kindest to one another, and they do there is a lot of drama there sometimes anyways, just naturally. So I'm not, I could also chalk it up to just like a point in time where my cohort level colleagues, my peers, we were all kind of like socially on the same page in a lot of ways. I wasn't maybe into it. I'm not saying I never participated in it though, but it was something that I was like always kind of like, this is probably the least cool thing. Like, that was probably the one major hang up that I had, that if that hadn't been going on, I might not have wanted to like seek other types of people to interact with. Yeah, I might have felt pretty fulfilled with those settings, and not really have cared to branch out, because I would have been cool with, I'd be like, whatever, this is fun, we're having a good time all the time, but honestly, I mean, I'm not saying people have never talked crap about me, but I don't really think I have any experiences or things that I'm like, yes, of course, people have done or said, harmful things, but it wasn't like a regular thing that was firsthand against me. Like, I don't feel like I was like the talk of the town all the time. I just witnessed other people often talking about other people. It wasn't necessarily even directed at me. And if it was, I was not aware of this at all. So, like I'm saying, there were like maybe a few things, but it wasn't like a lot. But I was pretty cautious about a lot of stuff too. But I don't know. I would say, it has definitely been nice to feel like things have definitely improved over time, and slightly improved more and more and more, to the point where now, like, pretty much everybody I know, I'd say I find them pretty trustworthy. I don't really tend to have too many people that I interact with that regularly. Like, I've got some loyalties, but to people who kind of get a pass on certain stuff, but on my end, but I'm pretty sure I get a pass on other people's end sometimes too. Like, I'm not perfect, but I don't know. Like, there's part of me that kind of likes the potential for where this can go. I just think the way it is now, the complexity that we're seeing with things now, at least that I'm noticing and sensing and feeling and experiencing, I don't like it. I don't like having all these unresolved, terrible problems in the world that are just causing fights and wars, and I'm just like, geez, I kind of want some kind of peace somewhere. Like, something's got to give somewhere, and it's like, I'm not seeing it getting better. Talking about it kind of almost makes it feel worse. But when I'm thinking about it, I'm also kind of like, well, maybe it's better that people are discussing things, because that can lead to more change. But everybody's discussing so many different angles of so many different things also, that the change is maybe pulling in either direction. It's like, it's not really one group's opinions. It's multiple groups having multiple opinions and multiple people taking multiple actions. Some actions kind of counter the other, like they're kind of taking actions for or against. So it's kind of like this tug of war kind of situation, as far as like the actions being taken by people in society. Like, people are boycotting stuff, avoiding certain stuff, blocking certain stuff. And then other people are like supporting it. They're like, well, I like this more, so I'm going to support it more, and double down supporting it more. While there are other people doubling down, like being, less and less supportive. So I don't know how that works. But like I was saying, like with that example with the snowboarding thing, there can be movement and shifts. I mean, in history, a lot of the movements that happened were probably because of times like this. I don't really know, but that's one way to get social change. But at the same time, it's like, it is exhausting. Like, I'm finding it exhausting. Like, when I first meet people, I don't want that much insight into their, choices. I want to get to know some other stuff first, and kind of just observe, how people do things just by hearing about what they do, and not really have somebody like shoving some idea down my throat, even if it's something I even agree with, or even if it's something that I'm also doing at the same time, where I'm like, oh, I'm practicing that now too. I don't want to talk about it, like, I kind of don't want to share that with everybody. Like, it's kind of weird, because it's like people aren't sharing other things. They're not sharing a little. Maybe I've noticed people being a little more open about mental health, sharing about mental health, or going into treatment and stuff. I've noticed people sharing about that, more than they were pre-pandemic, at least. Like, mental health treatment was definitely more taboo before the pandemic, from what I noticed, because I was working in mental health on both ends of it, so I definitely noticed people getting more comfortable with attending services and wanting services. And then you kind of would hear more on the internet people talking about getting services, and there is kind of like this social jargon with psychological topics, and then there's like the actual like clinical definitions of stuff. I have noticed that some of the topics from the psych world have become just kind of commonplace ways of like talking about things. I don't think it's necessarily bad, but it's weird. It's weird to see. I'm like, oh, that's what people are talking about when they mean that. Like, when they say that, they don't really mean it fully. I've maybe picked on this topic before, but You know how everyone's saying they're neurodivergent and having, being on the spectrum and having ADHD. Even the people who aren't diagnosed, or people want to be diagnosed with it, so they're like getting diagnosed. I don't know if I don't know what it is. I blame the internet. I blame a lot of things. I'm not. I don't know if it's all organic. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm completely incorrect with that. Who am I to really say that all these people, I mean, I think they are all experiencing something, but it's maybe all being classified as one thing, but there is so much variation within those diagnoses that some of it doesn't even look like the other stuff. Like, you can be, you can have PTSD, and that's a form of neurodivergence. The symptoms you experience. And you can have autism. Like, those are two different things. So if somebody's saying they're like neurodivergent, it's like, I don't know, it's sometimes kind of, it's to me, I feel like people are missing the details. They want to use the blanket term, but it's kind of like it doesn't really encompass or like maybe hone in on like exactly what people's experiences are. So when somebody says that, it's like, well, what do you actually mean by that? Some people, I'm like, well, maybe you have social anxiety. Some people, I'm kind of like, maybe you have like some form of paranoia. Other people, I'm kind of thinking like, well, maybe you have some kind of like sensory issue, like, but everybody would say they're neurodivergent, and everybody wants to have, Asperger's. I don't really know. Like, I can't really, it's not really my place to say, but I really am curious about that. I think social media has a huge role in it, and doom scrolling and being online so much. I don't have full proof of this. It is a general idea that I have, but I am not in a position in a professional way to really claim that is the full truth. And I almost feel just like I shouldn't even say that kind of stuff, but it's weird to me. It's weird, and I'm not even saying that I don't have any problems like that. I clearly got things going on. Like, goodness, like, if you know me, you know. Jeez, even if you don't know me and you're just listening to me on these podcasts, it's like, oh my goodness, like, it's not that hard to pick up on. But yeah, like, I don't know, like, it's, some people like the labels, though. I guess I do know that some people like a diagnosis, some people like an explanation for what they're going through. For me personally, I've always felt that labels were very limiting, because I'm like, I'm still my own individual person, and the labels don't fully describe me, and the labels also don't fully encompass everything I'm experiencing. It's interesting, but yeah, like, I don't know. I don't think it has to be a bad thing. I don't really know how to deal with it, though, right now. I'm not at a place where I know how to deal socially with being around a lot of in-depth conversations, especially with brand new people, because I overthink things, and I'm like replaying things in my head, and I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have said that, or maybe I don't like that they said that, and it's like, but I barely know them. I barely know these people I'm meeting. I barely even know them, and I'm not too pleased to know certain things about them before I know other things. I'm like, there's a lot of other stuff that I think I want to know. I don't really want to know the depth of your opinions on this certain thing. I kind of want to know, but maybe I want to know what they think, but maybe without talking about the specific. Like, I want to know in general. I want to know how people deal with the, is it called a conundrum? With that kind of, I don't know if it's a conundrum or a catch-22 or if that's even right, but basically how I was saying, like, how to juggle the balance between avoiding every single thing that has an issue against my values, or deciding to still participate with some of it, when it goes against my values. And then sharing this with other people who may or may not have the same values. I think, honestly, a lot of people I know, I think we generally have the same values. Maybe we differ on a couple things, but overall, we could probably make a list of things that overlapped where we could all agree that, okay, these are things that we all value that we would want to opt into supporting, and these are things that we want to opt out of supporting. And I think even with everybody I know that I currently interact with at all, we could probably come up with a couple pretty large lists and just decide to boycott or push money toward all of those things on either list. If we really wanted to do that, we could do that. I don't want to ever get together as a group and make that happen, but I think it's because of the risk of all the tearing down that has to happen in relationships. I'm kind of noticing that part I hate, that there's a lot of unbuilding that has to be done too. I think the arguments have to happen. I think the, hurt feelings have to happen. I think the anger has to happen. I think people have to get fed up enough with each other and then have to figure out how to work around and with and be around and befriend and hold space for and be in relationships with people that don't believe the same thing, but you know exactly what these people believe at a certain point. Now, a lot of people, what a lot of people believe now. And, I don't think, I've kind of put up a bit of a boundary about a lot of it. And I'm noticing it's like almost impossible for people to really, it's something that's like, it's definitely making it, it's hard to socialize when I don't want to talk about the things that everybody else wants to talk about. And it's not that I don't want to talk to them about it. It's like, it's more like, can we schedule a time to sit and talk about this specific topic? Let's discuss this. Not because I want to debate, but like, I know that you want to talk about this. Let's sit down together and like have a discussion sometime, or talk on the phone or whatever about this. I want to talk about this, and just sit and talk about it. I don't really like to talk to people where it's like we're going to be disagreeing the whole time. There's certain people that I know we disagree, but when we talk, it doesn't like feel that way, because we're just actively very careful and not really trying to just like hurt other people. And then there's other people that are just so passionate and hurtful about the things they do or say, and they don't have any regard for other people. And so it's just really hard to just have these conversations so regularly with so many people, or being around these conversations so often, when they all hit a little differently. Some of them, I'd say, I'm probably too sensitive to it all, because I don't really like the tension. I can definitely sense when there's like a lot of tension about something, and I hate that, especially when it's not necessary. When it's not tension that's like, okay, what can I change, what can I do? Like, but if you're mad at me because I believe a certain thing, or because I bought a certain thing, and you don't agree with it, and then I'm mad at you because I'm like, well, look what you bought. You bought this and that, and I don't agree with that. Like, I don't have the space in my head to be like doing that all the time. Like, that's, I don't know, it's too much for me. But if I have other topics, I think it's 2 hours, so let me stop